The Grand Assembly of the Tellurian Compact was a hall the size of a continent's heart, carved from the bones of a moon that had been hollowed out 1,000 cycles before any of the current speakers were born. Tiered galleries spiraled upward into a domed sky of projected nebulae, and in each gallery sat the delegates of 208 species. Some breathed nitrogen, some breathed nothing at all. All of them on this rotation had come to hear Ambassador Vossen of the Kelthari speak. Vossen was a tall, segmented being with a voice like wind moving through dry reeds. He stepped onto the central dais, folded his 4 arms in the gesture of patient amusement, and let the chamber settle into silence. "My honored colleagues," he began, "I have been asked yet again to address the matter of the Pale Walkers." A ripple of laughter passed through the chamber. The Pale Walkers were a story. Every species had a version of them. Bipedal creatures from a blue world, builders of ships shaped like spears, a people who had supposedly crossed the empty sectors before the compact existed and then vanished, leaving only debris and lullabies behind. "Children tell this story to frighten one another," Vossen continued, his reed voice curling with mockery. "Diplomats invoke it when their budgets are denied. Generals whisper it when their wars go badly. And yet, in 900 cycles of survey, in 2 billion catalogued worlds, in every archived signal from every dying star, we have found exactly 0 evidence that the Pale Walkers ever existed." He spread his arms. "They are a myth, a comfort, a shadow our species cast on the wall of the universe to make ourselves feel less alone. I move, as I have moved 7 times before, that the Compact formally retire the designation human from our threat registries, our diplomatic protocols, and our cultural." The lights died. Not all of them. Only the ones above the dais, the projected nebulae, the rotating star charts, the long-range telescope feeds that lined the upper galleries like windows. Every distant lens, every relay station, every observatory across the Compact's mapped territory had simultaneously gone dark. Vossen's 4 arms unfolded. He looked up slowly at the blank dome where a moment before there had been the cradle of the galaxy. A delegate from the foreign stood, then another, then 100 more. Voices rose, not yet panicked, only confused, the way a crowd murmurs when a lantern blows out at a festival. The speaker of the Compact, an elderly Dravani named Mehul, struck her staff against the dais. "Order," she said. "Order, technicians are reviewing the feed. There is no cause for—" A single light returned to the dome, just one. A pinpoint dead center above the chamber. It pulsed once. Then it grew, not in brightness, in number. Around the pinpoint others appeared. Then more. Then more. A constellation that had not existed an instant before, blooming outward like frost across glass, filling the entire projected sky with points of pale, steady light. The chamber went very quiet. Not silent, Mehul could hear the rasp of her own breath, the click of a translator's stem, the soft hiss of someone weeping in the foreign gallery, but quiet. A technician's voice broke from the dais speakers, thin and shaking. "Speaker, those aren't stars." Mehul did not turn. She could not turn. Her old eyes had already counted, and her old mind had already understood. "How many?" she said. The technician choked on the answer. 5,000 and rising, holding formation at the edge of the veil. No engine signatures, no heat, no transmissions. They are simply there. Vossen, still standing on the dais, looked down at his folded hands. They were trembling. He had not given them permission to tremble. Above him, in the false sky of the Grand Assembly, the constellation of 5,000 pale lights began, with terrible slow patience, to move closer. Within one rotation, every government in the Compact had declared a state of observation. The word war was not yet spoken, because the things in the dark had not yet done anything. That was the most frightening part. Admiral Ure of the Dravani Expeditionary Wing received her orders aboard the cruiser Hethnavall. She read them twice, then a third time, because the language was unfamiliar, not in vocabulary, but in tone. The Compact Council had written the orders the way a parent writes a note to a stranger watching their child. Please, be careful. Find out what this is. Yurei was old by Dravani standards, scarred along one side of her face from a pirate engagement 2 decades back, and she had not flown a forward scout mission in 11 cycles. The council had asked for her specifically. That, too, told her something. Her fleet was small, 12 vessels, enough to look serious, not enough to look threatening. They crossed 3 jump lanes and emerged at the inner edge of the veil, the great dust shroud that wrapped the outer arm of the galaxy and had, for as long as the Compact had kept records, been considered the natural border of charted space. Her censor officer, a young foreign named made a small sound. "Admiral." "I see them," Yurei said. She did. They were visible to the eye, to her actual eye, through the forward viewport without any optical enhancement at all. That was wrong. Ships at this range should have been pinpricks at best. These were shapes. Long, narrow, organized into nested rings, then nested rings of rings, then a vast lattice that her mind refused to read as a fleet because no fleet had ever been arranged this way. Engine signatures. "None, Admiral." "Heat." "None." "Then how are they moving?" Is swallowed. "They aren't, Admiral, not now, but they were." Yurei leaned forward. The lattice of vessels held its position with the calm of a mountain range. Each ship was painted a flat, light drinking gray, and on the flank of every one of them, repeated identically, was a single emblem, a small blue sphere wreathed in a circle of green leaves. She had seen that emblem before, in a children's storybook. Her grandmother had read it to her. "Open a channel," Yurei said. "To which?" "To the largest one, the one in the center. They'll have a flagship. Every fleet has a flagship." The communications officer, a Hesari, worked his console with 3 hands. "They're already listening, Admiral." "What?" "All standard frequencies. Compact emergency band. Dravani military encryption. They have the channels open. They have had them open. We didn't have to hail them. We only had to speak." Yurei sat back slowly in her chair. She thought of her grandmother. She thought of the storybook. She thought of every diplomat who had ever stood on the floor of the Grand Assembly and laughed at the idea of pale walkers from a blue world. "This is Admiral Yurei of the Dravani Expeditionary Wing, speaking on behalf of the Tellurian Compact," she said, and her voice was steady because she was old, and because old voices know how to be steady when young hearts cannot. "Identify yourselves." There was a pause, not long, 2 heartbeats, 3. A woman answered. The translator handled the language without difficulty, which itself was a kind of message. They had been studying the Compact's tongues long enough to render them flawlessly. "Admiral Yurei," the voice said, warm, polite, almost affectionate. "Thank you for coming. We've been waiting a long time to be introduced properly." Yurei's hand tightened on the arm of her chair. "Identify yourselves," she repeated. "My name is Amara Salvin, Fleet Commander, Earth Concordant Navy. I am authorized to speak on behalf of the Human Concordance, which represents 104 billion citizens across 19 settled systems." The bridge of the Hethnavall did not make a sound, not a breath, not a chair shift, not a console chirp. Yurei discovered she had stopped breathing herself and forced her lungs to remember their work. "You are a myth," Yurei said. It was not what she had meant to say, it was what came out. On the other end of the channel, Fleet Commander Amara Salvin laughed. It was not a cruel laugh. It was a tired one. The laugh of someone who had heard the same line many times and had stopped being surprised by it. "Admiral," she said gently, "we know." Amara Salvin was 38 years old by Earth's count, which made her young for her rank and old for her duty. She stood on the bridge of the flagship Vigil of Carthage, a name chosen, she had been told, by a committee that believed strongly in historical memory, and she watched the small Dravani cruiser hold its nervous distance. Behind her, banks of consoles glowed soft amber. Beside her, her executive officer, a tall man named Taran Okyo, waited with his arms folded. Around her, in the quiet hum of a ship built for patience, 300 crew members did their work. "She's going to ask the obvious question," Taran murmured. "I know. Are we telling her?" "We're telling her everything she needs to hear, not everything we know." Taran inclined his head. On the channel, Admiral Urey had recovered her composure. Imara respected that. The Admiral's voice came back firm and careful. "Commander Salvin, if your people are real, then explain to me how the Compact has had no contact with you for as long as our records have existed." "That's a fair question," Imara said. "The honest answer is that we made a decision, a long time ago, not to be found. The longer answer is that we have been listening to you the entire time." A pause on the channel. Imara waited. "Listening to what?" Urey said, and there was the smallest tremor in the what. "Everything. Your treaty negotiations, your trade disputes, your border skirmishes, your election cycles. The speech Ambassador Vossen gave 11 rotations ago, in which he called us a comfort our species invented to feel less alone. The speech he gave 112 rotations before that, in which he called us a fabrication of the foreign intelligence services. The speech he gave 230 rotations before that, in which he said—" "Stop," Urey said. Imara stopped. "How long?" the Admiral said quietly. "How long have you been listening to us?" 906 of your cycles, give or take. We picked up your earliest deep space transmissions before the Compact had a name. We have archives of every public broadcast your civilizations have ever made. I could tell you, Admiral, the name of the schoolteacher who taught your grandmother to read." There was a silence on the channel that lasted a long time. When Urey spoke again, her voice had changed. It was not afraid. It was something more careful than afraid, the tone of a person who has realized that the room she is standing in has been a room the whole time, and that she is the one who only now noticed the walls. "Why are you here now?" Urey said. "After all this time, why have you broken your silence?" Imara turned away from the viewport. She looked at Taran. He nodded once, the smallest gesture. She faced the channel again. 43 of your cycles ago," Imara said, "a compact patrol vessel encountered an unmarked craft drifting near the Heliocene Drift. The craft was a survey vessel out of Earth's outer colonies. It carried a crew of 19. 12 of those crew members were children, the families of the survey scientists, who had been brought along for what was supposed to be a 6-month observational tour. The patrol vessel did not ask the survey ship to identify. It did not signal. It did not warn. It opened fire and destroyed the ship with all hands. Then it logged the wreckage as unidentified debris and continued on its patrol route." The channel was utterly still. "We have the recordings, Admiral. We have the voices of the patrol crew. We have the laughter. We know which of your captains gave the order. We know who concealed the report. We know who paid him to conceal it, and we know what they paid him with." Urey did not answer. Imara had not expected her to. The Admiral was a soldier, and a soldier in that moment had nothing soldier-shaped to say. "We have waited 43 cycles," Imara continued, "because we wanted to be certain. We wanted to be certain it was not an accident. We wanted to be certain the report was real. We wanted to be certain that the Compact, given the chance, would not correct this on its own. It has not. So we have come to ask for it ourselves." A long breath came across the channel. "What do you want, Commander Salvin?" "Passage," Imara said. "To Othren, to the Grand Assembly. I will come alone. I will come unarmed. I will speak and then I will leave. The fleet behind me will not enter your inhabited space. The fleet behind me will not fire on any vessel that does not fire first. The fleet behind me is here for one reason only, Admiral, And that reason is that the last time we sent unarmed people into your territory, you killed them." Yurei closed her eyes. "I will arrange the passage," she said. "Thank you, Admiral." "Commander Salvin." "Yes." "What happens if the assembly will not hear you?" Imara looked again at the viewport, at the great pale lattice of her fleet, holding its silence at the edge of the veil, ships built across a century by people who had decided, long ago, that they would never again be the ones who were forgotten. "They will hear me, Admiral," she said. "One way or another they will hear me." The channel closed. Athren was the heart world of the compact, a planet whose surface had been sculpted over millennia into terraced cities of pale stone, ringed by orbital platforms and patrolled by a defense grid that had, in theory, never been breached. The Earth Armada arrived in its upper orbit without firing a single weapon, without triggering a single proximity alarm, and without, the defense officers later swore, being detected until the ships were already in position. 5,016 vessels held a precise geodesic formation around the planet, none of them within weapons range of any platform, none of them with weapons systems active. They simply existed there in patient gray rings, like a thought the planet had been having and only now became aware of. A single shuttle detached from the Vigil of Carthage and descended through Athren's atmosphere. Imara Salvin walked into the Grand Assembly alone. She wore a dress uniform of dark blue, unadorned except for a small green and blue emblem at the collar. She carried no sidearm. Her hands were empty and open at her sides. 2 Dravani honor guards walked her to the central dais, where Speaker Mehel waited with the entire chamber risen to its feet, not in respect, Imara understood, but in the way crowds rise when they are too unsettled to remain seated. She climbed the dais. She placed her palms flat on the speaker's lectern. She looked out at the 208 species of the Tellurian Compact, and she began. "My name is Imara Salvin. I represent the human concordance. I will not waste your time with introductions. You have known what we are since the moment our ships entered your sky. I am here on a single matter, and when I have spoken it, I will leave." She paused, the chamber breathed around her. 43 cycles ago, a compact patrol vessel destroyed an unarmed Earth survey ship near the Heliocene Drift. The ship carried 19 souls. 12 were children. The youngest was 4 years old by our reckoning. Her name was Anauk. The captain of the patrol vessel filed a report that the wreckage was unidentified debris, and the report was accepted by the regional command. And the regional command was overseen at that time by an officer whose patron in this assembly arranged for the matter to be closed. She let the silence stretch. "I have come to ask for that name." Speaker Mehel's staff in her 3-fingered hand did not move. The Dravani Admiral, Yurei, stood at the rear of the chamber where she had been permitted to observe, and her old scarred face had become very still. A delegate from the Hesari conclave rose, his 3 voices speaking in chorus. "Commander Salvin, the Compact has no record of any such incident. We have searched our archives upon learning of your accusation. There is no patrol vessel that filed any such report. The Heliocene Drift is in deep neutral space. We do not patrol it. We have never patrolled it. "I know," Imara said gently. "That is why I have brought the record myself." She raised her right hand. A small device on her wrist flickered once. Every speaker in the Grand Assembly came alive at the same instant. A man's voice, Dravani male, the rough cadence of a frontier accent filled the chamber. "Unmarked, no transponder civilian build. Looks like a science catch. Could be smugglers." A second voice, higher, younger. "Captain, they're hailing. Standard greeting on open band." "Ignore it." "Captain." "I said ignore it. We're not here. We were never here. Light them up." The chamber heard the weapons discharge. The chamber heard the survey ship's distress signal, cut short. The chamber heard faintly in the background of the patrol bridge audio someone laughing. The chamber heard a child crying, very briefly, over the open hail channel that the patrol vessel had refused to answer. The recording ended. Imara did not move. She let the silence do its work. Then she said, "The captain on that recording is named HFY. He was promoted twice after the incident and is currently retired with full honors on his homeworld. The patron in this assembly who closed his report." She paused. "Is standing in this room." A wave of motion went through the upper galleries. Heads turned, bodies shifted, voices rose and were hushed. Imara watched the Kelthari delegation. She watched specifically the segmented form of Ambassador Vasan, who had not spoken a single word since the moment she had entered the chamber, and whose 4 arms were now folded across his chest so tightly that the chitin of his joints had gone white. "Ambassador Vasan," Imara said. The chamber went still in a way it had not been still before. "Would you like to speak?" Vasan did not speak. Vasan turned, with the careful dignity of a being whose every instinct was telling him to run, and he walked out of the Grand Assembly. No one stopped him. Imara watched him go. She turned back to the speaker's lectern. "I will not pursue him," she said. "He is not mine to judge, he is yours. The patrol captain is yours. The regional command is yours. Every link of this chain, from the first shot fired to the last signature that buried the report, is yours. You have laws, you have courts, you have processes. I will not insult them by replacing them with mine." She lifted her gaze. "You have 6 rotations." A delegate began to protest. Imara raised one hand and the protest died. "6 rotations to deliver justice through your own laws. After that, I will deliver it through mine. My fleet will not enter your atmosphere. My fleet will not fire on your worlds. My fleet will, instead, broadcast the recording you have just heard in full on every public frequency in the compact, with a transcript of every name, every account, every signature, and every payment associated with its concealment. We will not take your worlds. We will simply ensure that your people know exactly who their leaders are." She stepped back from the lectern. "Thank you for your time." She walked out of the Grand Assembly the same way she had walked in, alone, unarmed, with her hands open at her sides. As the great doors closed behind her, the chamber she left behind began, slowly at first and then very quickly, to come apart. The first rotation passed in confusion, the second in argument, the third in panic. Ambassador Vasan did not return to his residence on Othrin. He boarded a private Kelthari shuttle within an hour of leaving the assembly and burned hard for the outer transit lanes, headed, his pilot logs later showed, for a Kelthari client world 3 jumps away. He did not make it. A Kelthari customs interceptor, acting on orders that had not yet been officially issued, brought him down in a controlled landing on a moon owned by his own family, where he was held under house arrest by relatives who had spent the previous 2 rotations watching their family name disintegrate on every public channel in the compact. Because Imara had not waited. The recording had been broadcast within an hour of her shuttle returning to the vigil of Carthage. Not because the 6 rotations had expired, they had barely begun, but because the recording had not been a threat. It had been a fact. And humanity, the compact was learning, did not negotiate with facts. Humanity merely placed them on the table and let everyone see what they were. By the 4th rotation, 3 regional governments had collapsed. The Dravani Council issued a formal apology and ordered the arrest of retired patrol captain HFY, who was taken into custody on his veranda while drinking tea and did not resist. The Hesari conclave dissolved its intelligence directorate. The foreign delegation, who had been the loudest mockers of the Pale Walker myth, requested a private audience with Commander Salvin and was politely refused. Above Othrin, the Earth Armada had not moved. That was the part the compact could not stop thinking about. 5,016 warships, every one of them silent, every one of them patient, every one of them clearly capable of reducing the planet to a memory, and they had done nothing. They had not even repositioned. They had simply held their geodesic rings around the heart world of the compact, and they had watched. Inside those rings, on the bridge of the Vigil of Carthage, Imara Salvin watched a different thing. She watched the compact tear itself apart. It was not pleasant. She had known it would not be pleasant. The factions that had benefited from Vassen's network were now scrambling to distance themselves from him, and the factions that had been bullied by his network were now scrambling to settle scores that had nothing to do with the survey ship, and the factions that had been entirely innocent were caught in the middle, trying to keep their own governments from disintegrating. Taryn Okyo brought her tea in the 5th rotation. "You haven't slept," he said. "I'll sleep when it's done." "It is done, you just won't watch the credits." She took the tea, she did not drink it. "Have they tried anything?" she said. "Once, a Kelthari loyalist faction inside the compact military attempted to seize the orbital tracking grid 2 rotations ago. They wanted to coordinate a preemptive strike on the Armada. They were stopped by their own people. We didn't have to do anything. The Dravani internal security broke their command structure within 9 hours. Good. Imara. She turned. Taryn was looking at her the way he had looked at her, once, 20 years ago, when they had been junior officers together on a colony patrol, and he had pulled her out of a burning shuttle by the back of her uniform. He looked at her like a friend. "You are allowed to be tired." "I know. You are also allowed to be sad." She looked at the tea. It was getting cold. "Anak was 4, she said. "I know. My niece is 4. "I know that too." She drank the tea. It was the first thing she had eaten in 18 hours, and she found that her hands were not entirely steady. On the 6th rotation, the Grand Assembly of the Tellurian Compact convened an emergency session. Ambassador Vassen was returned to Othren by his own family, in chains of Kelthari ceremonial silver, and was dragged, there was no other word for it, to the floor of the assembly. He did not speak in his own defense. There was nothing he could have said. Every signature, every payment, every comm log had already been published. Speaker Mehul read the charges. The chamber voted. The vote was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. Vassen was convicted under compact law of conspiracy to conceal an act of war, of obstruction of interspecies justice, and of 19 counts of accessory to murder. The sentence was death by compact tradition. It was carried out within the hour, by Kelthari hands, in a Kelthari ceremony, on a Kelthari world, witnessed by representatives of every species in the compact. Imara Salvin was offered a place at the witness gallery. She declined. "It is not my execution," she told the Dravani liaison who brought the offer. "It was never going to be." What the compact would remember in the cycles that followed was not the death of Vassen. It was the 6 rotations. It was the 6 rotations during which the largest armada any species had ever assembled hung over the heart of the compact and did absolutely nothing. It did not maneuver. It did not threaten. It did not issue ultimatums. It did not even respond to most communications. It simply remained the way a witness remains, the way grief remains, the way memory remains. In those 6 rotations, the compact had been forced to look at itself, not at humanity, at itself, at the network of corruption that had buried a survey ship and 19 souls and made the survivors of those souls wait 43 cycles for an answer, at the casual cruelty of a patrol captain who had decided that an unfamiliar vessel was easier to destroy than to identify, at the ambassador who had stood in the Grand Assembly and mocked the very people whose children he had helped to bury. The Armada had been the mirror. That was all. And the compact had looked into the mirror, and the compact had not liked what it had seen, and the compact, by its own laws, by its own courts, by its own hands, had begun the work of cleaning itself. That was the lesson. That was what every species in the assembly, in the rotations that followed, came to understand. Humans had not come to conquer. Humans had come to witness. And that, the delegates began to whisper to one another in the long, quiet hours after Vassen's sentence, was perhaps the more terrible thing. A conqueror could be fought. A conqueror wanted something: land, resources, tribute, surrender. A conqueror could be negotiated with, bribed, exhausted, outlasted. A witness wanted nothing. A witness only saw. And a witness who had waited 43 cycles to be heard, and who had built an armada of 5,000 ships in patient silence rather than fire a single shot in anger, was a witness who could wait forever, if forever was what it took. On the morning after the execution, Speaker Mehul of the Dravani sent a private message to the Vigil of Carthage. It contained 4 words. "Will you stay longer?" Amara Salvin, reading it on the bridge with Taran standing behind her, sent back 3. "No. We're done." She gave the order. The armada began to move. It did not move quickly. It did not move loudly. The 5,016 vessels of the Earth Concordant Navy released their geodesic formation around Othren and rotated, in a single coordinated arc, back toward the Vale. There were no farewells. There were no parting messages. There was no triumphant broadcast. There was only the slow, dignified withdrawal of a force that had come for a specific purpose, achieved that purpose, and now had no further business in the chamber. The compact watched it go. On every world, on every station, on every street, in every gallery of the Grand Assembly, in every barracks, in every classroom, in every place where any thinking creature in the Tellurian compact could find a screen, they watched the armada leave. It took 2 full rotations for the last of the Earth vessels to clear the inner edge of the Vale. They left in the same lattice formation they had arrived in. They left without taking a single world, a single resource, a single concession, a single prisoner, a single trophy. They had not even asked for an apology. They had only asked for the truth, and the truth had been delivered, and now they were going home. Admiral Ure of the Dravani watched the last of them disappear from her sensor screens aboard the Hethnaval. She sat in her command chair for a long time after the final vessel had gone. Is, her young foreign sensor officer, came and stood beside her without speaking. "Admiral," Is said at last, very quietly, "do you think they'll come back?" Ure thought about it for a long while. "Only if we make them," she said. The Tellurian Compact entered what its historians would eventually call the New Silence. It was not a war. It was not a peace, exactly. It was the quiet, careful condition of 208 species suddenly aware that they had been overheard their entire lives. The reforms came quickly. Patrol protocols were rewritten across every member state, with mandatory identification procedures and a hard prohibition on the destruction of unidentified civilian craft. Concealment of military incidents was reclassified as a capital offense. The intelligence directorates of 3 major species were dissolved and rebuilt under joint oversight. Retired patrol Captain Hethan Kovo was tried, convicted, and executed within a single cycle. Ambassador Vassen's entire political network, the patrons, the brokers, the comm officers who had passed his messages, the bankers who had handled his payments, was unraveled one thread at a time, and what was found at the end of each thread was published in the public record. No human ever returned to demand any of it. The concordance simply remained where it had always been, beyond the veil, listening. That was the strangest part for the compact, not the armada, not the recording, not the execution. The strangest part was that after the armada left, nothing else changed in the relationship. Humans did not open embassies. Humans did not request trade agreements. Humans did not send tourists or scholars or missionaries. The concordance acknowledged receipt of a formal apology from the Grand Assembly, replied with a single line, "Thank you, we have heard you," and then went back to its silence. Children's storybooks across the compact were quietly revised. The pale walkers were taken out of the section on myths, and moved to a new section the publishers were not entirely sure what to call. Some put them under history, some put them under astronomy. One foreign publisher, after long consideration, simply created a new category and labeled it Witnesses. 11 cycles after the Armada had left, Admiral Urey, now retired, with a great-grandchild on her knee, was asked by a journalist what she had felt at the moment Imara Salvin had first spoken to her across the channel at the edge of the veil. Urey thought about it. She thought about the storybook her grandmother had read to her. She thought about the constellation of pale lights blooming across the false sky of the Grand Assembly. She thought about a 4-year-old child named Anok, whose name she had not been able to forget in 11 cycles, and whose name, she suspected, she would not be able to forget for the rest of her life. "I felt seen," Urey said at last. The journalist did not understand. "By whom, Admiral?" Urey smiled. It was an old smile, the smile of a soldier who had finally made peace with the fact that some battles are not fought with weapons. "By all of them," she said. "All the ones we did not know were there. All the ones we did not bother to look for. All the ones we laughed at in a chamber that was full of ghosts the whole time, and we did not know we were the ones being haunted." She set down her tea. She looked up at the night sky of her homeworld, where, somewhere beyond the veil, 104 billion humans across 19 settled systems were going about their ordinary lives. School teachers were teaching. Farmers were farming. Mothers were carrying small daughters to bed. And somewhere in that ordinariness, in some quiet listening station on some quiet outpost in some quiet corner of the Concordance, a young officer was sitting at a console, sipping a cup of coffee, monitoring the long-range arrays. Listening. Always listening. The compact had its myths. Every species did. But it had learned in the new silence that there was one myth it could no longer afford. The myth of being alone. The myth of being unobserved. The myth that the universe was an empty room into which one could shout any cruelty and hear no echo back. The pale walkers were real. They had heard everything. And they were patient.